So now we're ready to sew the fronts to the back to create the pillowcase. So we have the back, we have it right side up, and then we're going to lay the fronts on it with the right sides down so that right sides are together. The one that we want to lay down first is the one that we put the buttonholes in. So we're going to lay that down, matching up the edges of our pillowcase so that the top edge, the side, and the bottom edge should match. Then we're going to lay the other front on top, wrong side up, and again we're going to match up the edges. So the top, the side, and the bottom. And then in the center, the two pieces should overlap. Okay. We're going to pin those along the edges. All the way around the back, making a square. Alright, so now once we get that pin, then we're going to be ready to stitch. And we're going to stitch all the way around the edges. So we're going to start in the side here, and we're going to we're going to pivot at this corner. We're going to sew down this side. Then we're going to sew all the way across the bottom. We're going to get to the corner, we're going to pivot. We're going to sew back up the other side, get to the top corner, we're going to pivot, we're going to come back around to where we started so that we're going to sew a big square. So I have my pillowcase in, I have it lined up with the edge of the presser foot to sew a 1/4 of an inch seam. I've started a little bit in from the top, and I'm going to back stitch, and then I'm going to sew at a 1/4 of an inch. When I get to the corner, I'm going to leave my needle down. I'm going to lift up my presser foot. I'm going to turn so that I can pivot and sew down the side. And when I get to the corner, you can use your hand wheel, leave your needle down, lift up your presser foot, pivot, sew across. Again. on our last corner that we're going to pivot. And we're coming back to where we started. We're going to stitch over that a little bit and back stitch. And we can pull out our threads and cut. Now that we have our pillowcase sewn, we need to clip our corners so that when we turn our pillowcase right side out, we reduce that bulk. So again, we're going to just clip at a diagonal inside that seam allowance, making sure that we don't cut our stitching. And we're going to do that to all 4 corners. With our 4 corners clipped, we're ready to flip the pillowcase right side out or turn it right side out. So we're going to come from the center where our buttonholes are going to do. We're going to turn that, flipping it so that we get it right side out. And then we're going to make sure that we get nice clean corners in all of the corners so that we get a nice square pillowcase. So we're going to turn it and we're going to push it with our fingers, get it to become a square. Then once we get it turned, then we can take our scissors and we can go inside there and we can poke very carefully those corners and get them nice and square. And we'll do that to all 4 corners. Just very gently pushing with the scissors until you get a square corner. Now we should have a pillowcase that lays flat. Now we're ready to sew our buttons on. So we have our needle threaded with a double thread and have a knot at the end. So to sew your buttons on with your pillowcase laying flat, you're going to set your button on top of your buttonhole. Now the direction that we stitch should be the same direction as our buttonhole. So we're going to want our stitches to run with our buttonhole. So we put our button there, and you're going to have to go through both layers of fabric. And you're going to mark coming up through your buttonhole where you want the center of your button to be. So you come up through that, make sure that's centered, okay, and then go back down, and you're going to go through all layers of your fronts, okay. Make sure your buttonhole, that it lays flat when it's sewn in there. Now that you have that, you can undo your button from your buttonhole. And you can set that piece aside and we can just sew with the piece that goes for the button. Okay. And we're going to sew through there. I'm going to come back up. And because I'm sewing an eyed button that does not have a shank, I'm going to have to create that shank. So after I get a stitch in there, I'm going to take a pin. I'm going to put a pin underneath those stitches so that I create space in there so that I can pull my shank on the other side. I'm going to sew that button through about 4 times. Then I'm going to come up through the fabric but behind the button. Okay. And I'm going to circle around underneath that button about 3 times to create the shank. And then I'm going to go back down through the fabric and I'm going to tie that knot off. So I go underneath my stitches, create a loop, bring my thread through that loop and pull it tight. I'm going to do that one more time. Then you can cut your threads, remove the pin, and you can button your button. Okay. All right. You're going to repeat that same process to do the other 2 buttons. Now that you have your 3 buttons on, your pillowcase is finished. So now you're ready to insert your pillow insert into the actual pillowcase. So unbutton your pillowcase and you're going to have your 15-inch square pillow insert. You're just going to slide it in both sides and push it into the corners so that it fills out your corners. And then you can button your pillowcase.